What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with another solo podcast on a Sunday, though. So I don't feel bad about it being solo. I normally feel bad. Still hate doing these, but love to talk hoops. And we have some stuff that I wanted to hit for a while. And we're going to have to talk about the Jalen Brunson extension, is basically what I want to spend a lot of time on, of course. Very quickly, though, just want to announce that thank you for everyone who helped us hit 5K subscribers on YouTube recently. We are going to have a merch drop in celebration. And if you're watching this, I'm giving you a preview of it. One of the designs right now, I think we have 4. We wanted to have 5, but there's one that there's been a hold up and I can't necessarily do it myself. So there will be 4 in the drop. This is the first one. Oh man, you can't see my mics here. Hold on. That was better on YouTube if you didn't see the pause. Nice little sicko mode shirt for the sickos. It is going to be called the Sicko Collection. So I won't spoil all of it. Grant has seen it. He did approve it. I wanted to get some test merch to make sure that everything, like the material is good. The place, very quickly, it's a little bit more expensive than when we were using TeePublic, but the quality seems to be a lot better. And I think we'll run a promo when we launch, like maybe 15% off of a certain amount of purchase or something. So if you want to support the show, be on the lookout for that. I'm really happy with how all the stuff turned out and excited to share it with you guys. And hopefully everyone sends me a bunch of pictures and screenshots of them wearing it, because we'll definitely have magnets. I will send you if you send me the screenshot for free. You don't have to pay for the magnets. I know, very generous of us with all these magnets. I'm trying to get stickers. Those might take a while though. So that's exciting. But let's talk about Jalen Brunson. Did the thing, son of a brun. He did it. I'm not surprised that he did it, because a lot of people I trust and who know things believe that he was going to, but it was still one of those things where it was, I'll believe it when I see it. And so I want to get into the framing of this, because Woj reported that he's basically leaving an unprecedented amount of money on the table. It's an unprecedented concession. I even made a joke that we saw LeBron take almost a $3 million pay cut. And then Jalen Brunson said, watch this, and took way more, or sacrificed way more. But then I also saw the pushback like, well, this is a 3+1. He's going to opt out afterwards. He'll be able to sign the 35% max. He'll recoup X amount, and all these numbers are being turned around. Or maybe he'll extend off this current one. There's been a bunch of different ways to frame it. And so, look, Jalen Brunson could have entered. So I want to start here. There's just a few points I want to make about this. We know how important he is to the Knicks, but that's why this is important. But about what this means for their future. But let's look at the framing. Jalen Brunson could have opted out next summer and would have been eligible for a max of 5 years and about $269 million is what the cap projects to be at. He is so important to the Knicks. If you want to get into whether you actually think, when you kind of saw that, well, there wasn't a market for James Harden, and yeah, there was a market for Paul George, but it was like kind of Philly, and that was it. It was weird. Jalen Brunson's younger, so you have to open that. But again, small guard, maybe there's not people tripping over themselves to give him a 4-year max to compete with the Knicks. He is so important to the Knicks, and they've built their team in the image of him, of believing that he is going to be there, that he is their North Star, because he is. He was before they made the Mikal Bridges trade, before they made the Anunoby trade. But my point is, they've continued to lean in to that. You were going to give him the 5 years and $269 million if he wanted it. That is my point. So that is actually something that he opted against doing. He could have, if there was a catastrophic injury, an Achilles or something, okay, maybe we have this debate. Does he have enough equity like kind of Klay Thompson did with the Warriors? We're going to pay him anyway. My guess would be, yeah, because they don't have a choice. Like, this is just, he is everything to the Knicks. So if he waited, he would have signed. He could, or I should say, he could have signed for 5,269. So that is something he actively passed on. So I don't think it's fair to say that he didn't really make a sacrifice, or that he's planning on recouping this towards the end of the deal, or not the end of the deal, but on his next deal. And yeah, okay, you can look at it that way and think, oh, I mean, Rick Brunson's on the coaching. That was one of the better jokes, by the way. Someone quote tweeted, it was like, in unrelated news, though, Rick Brunson got a $15 million per year raise, which was great. And I think I saw, it might have been a Dunked On subscriber made the joke to them that that they were that the rights to the the Roommates podcast was being purchased for like a $500 million or something. So that was funny. But if you believe that Leon Rose and that the Knicks brass have this thing set up where they're agreeing to paying Brunson when he can opt out the full boat, which that deal right now, so if he opts out on his current deal, which he can do, that would be the 2028-2029 season. His max salary at that point, I believe at 35%, $72 million over. So a 5-year, $417.9 million deal. Yeah, I mean, there's a chance that I won't rule out anything because of just the way that he got here. Yeah, there's a chance that they've told him that they'll take care of him in some form. That's still a risk on his part. We're talking about someone who, when he hits free agency again, he will be 32 years old. And so we know what we know about small guards. He's listed at 6'1", 6 foot in some places. It's probably on a good day that he's hitting 6'1". So there's a risk of leaving that money on the table. What he did was as close to it was a real concession. I don't understand people framing it a different way. Now, if you want to frame it in a different capacity because he's going to hit free agency sooner, so even that he waited to sign that 5-year deal, it's not the same thing. That's fair. So let's break this down in the terms of let's look at it as a 3-year deal. Like following this, so he's under contract for this season, and then his player option beginning in 25-26 was declined. So there are 3 seasons before the next player option. So we know that he's going to be on this number, never going to make more than $40.6 million, I believe, per year under this contract. So let's just look at those 3 years. In the first year of the contract, he is taking an $11.4 million pay cut. In the second year of that contract, a $12.4 million pay cut. And then the final year, even though before the player option, $13.3 million pay cut. That adds up to $37.1 million about over 3 years. And so when you do the math on that, like just $37 million over 3 years is not nothing for someone who is not coming off a mega deal. Remember, when he signed this contract with the Knicks, then again, I continue to own this. I was wrong about his fit, wrong about how aggressive they were. I was just wrong. I mean, even people who were optimistic about Jalen, to be fair, about Jalen Brunson were wrong. He just turned into a top 5, top 6 MVP candidate. But there were people who were uncomfortable with the money. I wasn't uncomfortable with the money, but there are people who are uncomfortable with the money. So this isn't someone who is signed. Yeah, at the end of all these 2 deals, like, yeah, you're still going to be like, wow, man, this dude made over $250 million or whatever it ends up being. Okay, I get that. But like, this isn't LeBron. And we'll get into the pay cut situation itself, but he is taking over the next 3 years, not the upcoming season, but the 3 after that, an average of $12.4 million per year is what he conceded. So even if you want to just isolate that down to a 3-year window, that's a lot of fucking money. That's Dante DiVincenzo every year, basically, or because Mitchell Robinson is declining, Mitchell Robinson every year. That is what he basically conceded, one of the Knicks' top 6 player salaries per year over the next 3 seasons. I'm not saying you need to commend him for it, but let's not try and frame this as Jalen Brunson is not making a sacrifice, and let Knicks fans kind of have this. Everyone knows Knicks fans hate me, which is honestly hysterical, but like people making fun of their reactions, saying that it's like they just, won, like formed a dynasty or something. And that's the positive side of fandom, where a player does something where it feels like they care about the jersey, the city name on their back, and the fans, where it's not just a job, and you're going to react in that way. It's the toxic bullshit that's annoying or should be annoying to everyone. Like those reactions, yeah, okay, troll them, that's fine, but like to actively make fun of them in a mean-spirited way, to just, I find that so, like, let Knicks fans have this. Like, this is a big deal. And I don't think Jalen Brunson was obligated to do it by any stretch. That kind of makes it even that much sweeter. And now there are 3 points I want to make after this. And so let's start with the Mikal Bridges trade. This podcast is right every once in a while. This is one of those times, once in every few years. We had mentioned that one of the reasons I came around on Jalen Brunson signing the extension was because of the Mikal Bridges trade. And you now need to fold what Jalen Brunson just did. And even if you want to frame it in a 3-year window, so the $12.4 million per year, an extra wiggle room beneath an apron, because it's not necessarily a cap space situation. We will get to that, I promise. But you need to fold that into the cost they paid for Mikal Bridges. And so it was already justifiable in the sense that if you believe he is a missing link to you becoming a championship contender, go ahead and make the trade. In all likelihood, the first 2 first-round picks that you have to convey in 25 and 27, whatever. It's the other 2 on the back end of that. And of course, you want to see what Milwaukee's turns into. But you can make a case that 3 of the 5 picks they gave up are going to be bottom 10. And that's not an astronomical price. Now, when you get to the swap and then the 2 picks in 2020, you have 2029 pick, 2031 pick, shit gets uneasy because you don't know what Brunson, again, this core is young enough to where it could still be together, but we know windows close all the time. Players leave, they get too expensive. And so there's a chance the Knicks could be in a rough spot if they don't meticulously kind of balance the future with the present, and whatever move they make next be for someone who can help be the bridge with Jalen Brunson. Because you look at, even if they're on the younger side, like, do you view Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart and even Mikal Bridges and of course Julius Randle? It just, all these guys are not, Jalen Brunson is the guy. The fact that he'll only be 32 when he's set to hit free agency next, that's 2029. Like, yeah, he could still have, even what we know, like, look what Kyle Lowry was able to do. Like, you could still have 2-3 years left of his prime, even if he's not at this level. And I think it's a fair bet to say, okay, you know, when he's up for his next deal, maybe he's not at this level. This level's fucking top 10 territory or better. He was just 6th in MVP voting. I think I erroneously said 5th the other day in a podcast, so I apologize to anyone who was offended by me getting that wrong. I like those picks, again, just a justifiable cost. It was a lot and it was an overpay, but you knew you're going to have to overpay Mikal Bridges because he's on a below market deal with 2 years left. No options to get out of that. Brunson coming back on this below market deal that basically within that same span is saving you $12.4 million, just that 3 year. It's more. He could have signed for way more, but I'm using I guess I'll call it the least favorable interpretation of this, or maybe you just want to call it the most realistic one, whatever you want to use it. But Brunson signing this deal, to have him at 3 years and never just coming, like, he's never going to make, he would if he opted in, but I'm assuming he'll decline his player option in 2028. Like $40.6 million he's going to top out at. Like, that is wild when you look at the percentage of what the salary cap is. I mean, we're talking about someone who finishes, this is now his 3rd contract, and under it, he is never going to account for more than 23% of the salary cap if projections hold. That's absurd. And it's a big deal. And you fold it into the Mikal Bridges trade because Mikal Bridges is his friend, his buddy, the same thing with Dante DiVincenzo and Josh Hart. The other thing you fold into the Mikal Bridges trade is, what does this mean about Mikal Bridges' future? Because in 6 months, he can sign an extension. I think it's like 3 years, $113 million. Given the archetype of player he is, and the fact that he's also on a deal that aged into an extremely team-friendly contract, he shouldn't sign that extension. He should probably wait, because there will be a team that will pay him more, even if it's just a matter of getting more years and slightly more money per year. Like, I don't know if he's going to be a max contract guy when he hits free agency in 2026, but like, there are a lot of people who probably prefer him as a player to OG Anunoby, and look at what OG just got over 5 years, 5 and 212. Does this mean, though, that he's just going to sign an extension? Because then that needs to be factored into the cost of these players are willing to make those sacrifices to help you keep the core together, to help you keep improving. Now, this is a big deal in the sense of, let's actually look at the Knicks' finances in that first year. And so you have Jalen Brunson now is going to be penciled in at, which is just, I still can't, it's about $35 million. We'll round up a little bit. I still can't, like, that's what I'll have to wrap my head around. So if you pencil him in for that, which again, substantially less than he would have gotten in that season. So you're going to pencil him in for the $35 million number with Julius Randle's cap hold, who has a player option, and Julius Randle's cap holds, I think, like $43.4 million. The Knicks are like, we're scaling so far out. Their books could change. Does Precious Achiuwa come back? But I'm talking about right now, right here, right now. The Knicks are like 3 million, 4 million, maybe 2 million. If they don't do anything else, which they obviously will, outside of the second apron, or they have about 10, they're about 3 million into the first apron. And so, yeah, they'll be into the tax comfortably, but the second apron room is like, they're closer to now because of this Brunson deal. That's with Julius Randle's cap hold, $10 million beneath the second apron. Let's just say, might be rounding up a little bit. I don't think Julius Randle's, maybe he signs an extension, maybe it doesn't. I'm not paying Julius Randle $40 million a year in his next deal. Maybe if it's super short term. So there's a chance that number comes down. And now all of a sudden you're talking about, okay, like, we have the meat and potatoes of our, let's just call it the top, 7 players on this roster. We'll assume Julius Randle will come back. If you want to throw Deuce McBride in there, like, that's your 8-man core is under contract, and that's where we're at. And we've got $15 million beneath the second apron. Right, we're rounding out a rotation with a bunch of cheap guys. But if we have to make a trade, move one of these Villanova guys or make a trade with Julius Randle. It just becomes more feasible to do that. So Jalen Brunson has increased the Knicks' ability to stay out of the second apron, where the tax penalties, one, are going to get more punitive starting next season. But two, we know about the trade restrictions. And those are like legitimate. When you're talking about frozen draft picks, when you're talking about not being able to take back more money in a trade, in addition to a litany of other limitations, that's to a team like New York, at least when they're not already paying an absurd amount of luxury tax, that's important because they might be willing to fork over we don't care about the tax bill. Let's just say they're thinking that way. It still limits your maneuverability. And so in this way, they might have, who knows who comes to play for the mini level exception. There are pathways if Julius Randle leaves or if he takes a lot less, like could they open the non-taxpayer mid-level? Probably. I mean, maybe, but it'd have to be like a pretty substantial pay cut. This is a big deal that Jalen Brunson did that, because I would say like there's now a pathway for, instead of the Knicks just being, and they still might be, I want to make that clear, but instead of the Knicks being a second apron team in 2025 or by 2026, maybe it's by 2027. Maybe it's even after that at this point. That matters when we're looking at the limitations applied to what happens to you on the trade market and your ability to sign free agents. And this is nothing about the finances of having to pay a more punitive luxury tax bill. That's a big deal. It also, what it does, and this is going to lead me into, I think, what might be the larger point here, or one of the most interesting ones, I should say, is it kind of set an example. And maybe it's, you could say OG Anunoby took less than his max to stay over 5 years. I don't know if he took a pay cut relative to his market. Yes, there were 4-year maxes floating around there, but he couldn't get a 5th year from anyone other than the Knicks. If you're Julius Randle specifically, and you're seeing Jalen Brunson on the books for $35 million next season, there has to be a little bit of a light bulb. Yes, that's going to be less than, and I don't mean next season, 25, 26. That's the year I'm talking about. That's less than OG Anunoby, who's going to be about $39.6 million. So maybe don't factor it in that way. Maybe you think you're the more valuable player than Jalen Brunson, but it kind of sets the tone for negotiations with his extension, which is good for the Knicks. I don't know if it's good for Julius Randle, but it does kind of create a trickle-down effect of, well, if Julius Randle sees Brunson doing this to help keep the team together, help give them flexibility, everyone could believe that they're just going to take care of Brunson in the next deal. That's fine. He's still taking a risk here and giving them immediate flexibility, not in the vein of they're going to have all this cap space to spend, although if Julius Randle just left, but in the vein of we're not going to be as kneecapped when it comes to making other transactions, free agency signings and trades specifically. But it could also, do you get Julius Randle for, I don't know what the number is that I'd be comfortable with extending Julius Randle at. He has more leverage, I think, actually, than he did before the Mikal Bridges trade, because the specter of, well, they might just go out and get a better second best player. That's not happening anymore. Like Julius Randle is, if you think Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are better on balance or more valuable on balance, I will listen to cases for that. But Julius Randle's shot creation is now more important following the Mikal Bridges trade than before it, because I don't want to call it a threat, but like the possibility of the Knicks acquiring a second best player who's a better shot creator than Julius Randle is now off the table. So that gives him an additional amount of leverage, I would think. Still, I think it sets an organizational tone, especially for someone like Julius Randle, who's in a similar situation where he was already good. We knew it, like we saw it with the Lakers, we saw it with the Pelicans, but the Knicks played host. I won't say they're responsible for it. They gave him an opportunity, but they played host to Jalen Brunson's superstar ascension. They did the same for Julius Randle, regardless of where you classify him relative to the rest of the league. He has made 2 All-NBA teams, which is something that's most likely not happening if he had stayed in New Orleans. So, or if New Orleans didn't even want him. Think about the context under which Julius Randle came to New York in the first place. So the fact that Jalen Brunson does this, I'm not advocating for Julius Randle to do it. I'm not saying he should do it, but it does set a precedent that probably costs him a little bit of leverage in extension talks, or maybe makes him more open to be like, well, I'll just give me the JB deal or something. Like, would he do that? I don't know if he would do that. But that, even the fact that possibilities on the table is a big deal for the Knicks. And so I don't know where it's going to head, but like this, and maybe it sets an example for Mikal Bridges too, where he just ends up signing his extension. Again, I am always just, the players should get paid as much as they like. I trolled LeBron for taking, it was such like a negligible pay cut. And I think the PR tour that it went on, like, good job by his people, but it's just, if the Lakers could have just made trades and finished further beneath the second apron if they wanted to. But again, he took less and it's millions of dollars less. That's not his obligation to do so. So the fact that Jalen Brunson did this is a big deal, but we don't need to troll LeBron. I guess you could troll again the PR tour of it all. But this gets into a fascinating question of, and I did see some people ask this, is the players union going to be mad about this, or should they be mad about this? Is this going to become a norm where stars are taking less to help facilitate their teams' existence under that second apron? I think it's a fair question, but we need to see more instances of stars doing something this dramatic, even if you view it as this temporary 3-year window that's costing them a total of $37 million. And we just haven't seen that yet. And there are two other things here. And with Brunson specifically, I don't think the players union is going to be mad, because I outlaid the risk at the top of this segment. We're talking about a smaller guard. You could believe whatever you want. The Knicks have worked out under the table. There's a risk here. If he's not the same player in 3 years, the Knicks are not going to give him that 400 plus million. That's just not going to happen. I mean, and so you could look at what happened with James Harden in Philly. So, and at that point, yeah, Brunson will be around the same age, close to it that James Harden was when the whole Philly stuff went down. He'll be a little bit younger and clearly has a better relationship and longer standing ties with the organization. But there's a real risk here and no guarantee that he recoups it. And I get that element of it. But he also could look at it as, okay, I've had 2 years of hitting the stardom ceiling. And what if I do suffer an injury? I am a smaller guard. Or what if he's looking at the free agency market this year where, yeah, non-stars are getting hit more than anything, but mostly because stars weren't hitting free agency in the first place. You can kind of look at James Harden and say, well, there just wasn't a market out there for him. Again, James Harden's older. Paul George had a market of one team, maybe two if you want to include Orlando. And there might have been other teams. Golden State tried to get him in a sign and trade. But if you're trying to use the threat of not needing your team's help to get to where you want to go and get paid, he might have just said, I want to lock this down. I go through the first part of my career as sort of undervalued in Dallas until we get to that, final playoff run that he had where we always knew that, or sickos knew that he was really good, really valuable, but that was sort of his introduction to the national stage, maybe the more casual fan, maybe a postseason push that his name had been linked to the Knicks for a while, but that makes Knicks fans excited about not when they got him, but actively pursuing him. He could look at that and say, though, I didn't make a ton of money in my first contract. I can set myself up now. It's still an obscene amount of money and I'm going to be fine. And then, yeah, maybe there's a chance I get paid more at the end of this. But I wouldn't even rule out if let's say he gets another deal from the Knicks. I think we're caking in the assumption that he's just going to get the 5 years and $400+ million when that's just, I honestly, personally, I would be kind of surprised if that's the route they go, but that probably also means that he had a hell of a 3 years if that just becomes a no-brainer option for the Knicks. So because it's Jalen Brunson and there's his unique path here, I don't know that the players union should take exception to this. And then also the team circumstances of he's just reuniting with all the Nova Knicks. So he has all those guys. If you're happy somewhere, this is your team. And that's the other part of this, is that he's doing this for a franchise on which he is the guy, and that no one officially, no one currently on the roster and no one that they could feasibly acquire with the assets they have is ever going to usurp him in status or importance. And so as the face of the franchise to do this, I do think it's a little bit different. And again, as I mentioned before and didn't really get in the numbers, he might have just seen free agency is so weird where you see Simone Fontecchio go for 2 years and $16 million. It's okay, Isaiah Hartenstein got paid, but only on 2 guaranteed years. Jalen Brunson is a different caliber of player than all of those guys, but free agency has changed, particularly even when cap space is floating around out there, particularly as teams try to figure out how to navigate these new rules. So this is not a case where I would say the players union should be upset. Now, if it continues to happen, that's the question. Is this what star players are going to have to do to ensure that their teams can remain under the second apron and flexible enough to make moves on a whim, just to hustle, to make adjustments to where you're not locked in for specifically, never mind even frozen draft picks, but and the tax bill, but the dollar for dollar matching in trades just becomes a huge conundrum, along with not being able to aggregate salaries. Could it happen? Yeah, for sure. I think it could become a trend. We need to see it first before you're overly concerned about it. But I think this would be an unintended consequence, because I really don't think the league or the players union kind of understood the impact that the second apron was going to have on excuses if you're the Clippers, but really transactionally on what teams are going to be doing. So the thing you need to look at, though, and this everyone I think had to see coming, is we might just get to a point where the money is so absurd that these guys are saying, well, I'm just going to be super rich and put myself in what I think is a better situation. Yeah, I'm making a little less, but I'm in a better situation to win. And so I'm going to take less and still make, in Jalen Brunson's case, still guarantee myself $150 million. But like, think about what a pay cut could look like for Jalen Brunson's next contract, where, we're talking about the 5-year, $417.8 million number. What if he's just like, yeah, I'll take, just give me 5 and 300 or something. Like, so because that's still such a ridiculous number, we need to be, I'm not advocating for it. There's a max salary, and if players are able to get it, they should get it if they want it. But we now kind of need to, I don't think, and it should never be, this would be the thing I would take exception to, is that if you think Brunson should have done this, was obligated to do this, if you now think that Julius Randle should be taking less just because of what Jalen Brunson is making. Yeah, Jalen Brunson's the better player, but he's now making less than OG Anunoby. Like, he's locked that down, like, during the life of his deal. That expectation, that is cringy. That is toxic. We're not there yet. And the money's just getting so obscene. Yes, it's relative to the salary cap, to basketball related income. Like, all this stuff is connected to what the NBA is doing. But like, the number itself, like, that is outpacing the percentage of the NBA's business. Okay, great, fine. That is way outpacing reality when you look at what is happening with wages. Like, that's just, I mean, it's always, even if you're taking a pay cut, you're still a millionaire. But like, we're getting to a point where these contracts are growing, it feels like exponentially, and it is important to look at them as a percentage of the salary cap, but the raw dollars, what they mean when you're looking at them, and then what they mean to a player's and individual's generational wealth, to where they can set up the next 10 generations of their family or whatever. The money's getting so ridiculous that it would not surprise me if something like this would be abnormal, because Brunson hasn't had that mega deal. But if someone in a Paul George's situation at the end of his career could have gotten a max, and if there was some way with the Clippers and the negotiations weren't totally fucked, it sounded like, it was just like, yeah, I'll take. I mean, again, the number is so different because now we're only dealing with like in the 200 millions and rather than the 400 millions. But we need to probably be prepared for maybe this to become more common. I just don't think it should ever be the expectation of a player. If a team is going to, if there are teams that are willing to pay you that money and you want that money, that is totally your right and you've earned it. And then it's on the team to flesh out a competent roster or make the most of the core around you with the resources and financial spending power they are still left with. Brunson did something here that is extraordinary to me. And you can look at it however way you want. I don't think really any framing is disingenuous. I think you can look at it and say, okay, he always would have had a player option even at the end of that 5-year one. And just like, it's fair to say, look, we broke it down to that 3-year window. I think that's the worst way to view this. The whole, he's just going to get the $417.8 million when he's a free agent next time because Knicks and relationship with Leon Rose and yada, yada. I don't want to hear it. I think that's bullshit. And you can let Knicks fans have this victory because it's an actual victory from a team building perspective and just what it means for the vibes of just, well, this feels like a roster that might be, or a core that might be together a little bit longer than some others, just because there's like this top-down alignment between not just front office and coaching, it seems like, but front office, coaching, and players that you don't always have with even the top tier organizations. With the Knicks are, frankly, I mean, they're turning into one. They are one at this point with the way that they've operated on the margins. And the Jalen Brunson extension is like, he has once again changed literally everything for the Knicks. And the fact that he's now done it a second time in less than half a decade, it's a big deal. He should be commended for it. It should not be something that was considered an obligation of his. It should also just not be something that we're kind of poo-pooing. It's just like, well, he's going to recruit this. But no, he sacrificed immediate guaranteed money a lot per year, like almost he sacrificed a Dante DiVincenzo per year. I'm just going to frame it that way. So huge for the Knicks, obviously, and it increases the chances that this core is able to stay together way longer than maybe some others. And it'll be interesting to see what they do with this in the years moving forward. Does it impact how much they're giving Julius Randle? Does it increase the chances Mikal Bridges just extends? It'll be fascinating to watch from that perspective. The next thing I wanted to talk about might surprise a few people, but I had S. Barahini on, and we talked about rebuilding teams. We've had extensive talks about the Nets, so I don't feel bad that we kind of had to blow through them. But Charlotte Hornets fans were upset that we didn't get to them. We got to every other quote-unquote rebuilding team. We ran out of time. I am sorry. But let's talk about the state of the Charlotte Hornets rebuild, which we said on this podcast, which, by the way, this is why Grant and I go through those, even though they seem basic and some of them are, they're obvious ideas, but that's why we do the every team or break up per conference thing, so that it gives us a chance to talk and analyze every team and try to appeal to every single fan base. But for the Hornets specifically, I've liked basically everything they've done like since the trade deadline. Now, the quibble, there are two things you could quibble over, and let's start with the biggest one. So you give Miles Bridges, it ends up being a 3-year, $75 million deal, I believe. Yes, 3-year, $75 million deal. And from a human morality perspective, it makes me uneasy because it doesn't seem like, and publicly, it doesn't seem like he has done or said anything that makes that demands the benefit of the doubt or a chance at redemption. Maybe stuff has happened behind the scenes. I'm not saying you need to publicize if you've done something good, but just the initial domestic violence incident followed by the allegations thereafter, credible allegations, by the way. It makes me, from a human element, it makes me uneasy and not thrilled. However, and I really hate doing this, but however, he did the punishment that was bestowed upon him was argued, according to the NBA's rules, like he ends up missing an entire season, which is not what he was actually suspended for. So he served the suspension or the punishment that they levied, and it seems like the league has moved on, and this is someone they're going to take talent over morality at any given point. And this isn't to, I'm not trying to give the NBA cover from an individual's perspective, is that we can't look at a corporation and this massive entity as an arbiter or a billboard for, it'd be great if we could, but it's just not going to happen. And so there could be just this disproportionate views of, well, why didn't he, like, he's out here getting this huge contract, but Jonte Porter's banned for life after betting on games. You don't want to get into comparing the two just too much, because it in some way then ends up diluting the severity of both, or at least one of them. And that's just not something you want to do, especially when there are other people involved. The mother of Bridges' his children specifically. From a basketball perspective, this roster now, though, with him, when you look at them drafting Tidjane Salaun, when you look at them having Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball and having Mark Williams, that's like a deceptively big lineup there, where it's LaMelo Ball, I think, is your smallest player at 6'5". And so that's an interesting core off which to work. Now, would I have taken Salaun in the Hornet spot? No, I would have went with Cody Williams, but that's because Cody Williams is at the top of my board. I still think he's interesting from the perspective of, I don't agree with a lot of the draft comps I've seen. I guess Obi Toppin's the one that I've seen a lot. Maybe you can make a case offensively for the way he moves without the ball and his ability to, finish above the rim and having the 3-point shot, which percentage-wise does not look good. Free throw percentage was encouraging, and I was watching some of his jumpers that are mostly coming off the catch. There's nothing that stands out. There's sometimes where the form looks a little wonky, it feels like, where he's kind of off to his right or his elbows out too much. But like, just from a comfort perspective, it seems like he will be an above average shooter in the NBA. Now, in the situations where he's taking off the dribble looks, needs to tighten his handle one for that. But there are some times where it looks smooth and the floor is really open. I don't know if he's ever going to become that type of an offensive player. And this team doesn't need him. If you're going to keep LaMelo and you have Brandon Miller and you do have Miles Bridges, you don't need him to be that. Where I diverge from the comps is, like, Salaun has the chance to be really good defensively. And I don't know if he's going to hold up on the ball right away, but this seems like someone who, when you look at players and you kind of wonder, all right, we don't know if they're good defenders out of the gate, but they can be disruptive away from the ball, or they can force turnovers a bunch, or you can put them on really difficult assignments. And I think this is someone who could credibly guard both the 3 and the 4. And then if you really wanted to get like funky, let's just roll him out as a small ball 5 and see what happens. So I like purely talent on the court perspective. I kind of like the base off which they're working. And I think that I don't know if it's because the Hornets have been so bad and look incompetent for so long that we've lost the plot a little bit on how to kind of view the context of their rebuild, but they're now a net plus in the first round pick department. I think the deal they made for PJ Washington was good for them, and it turns out it worked out for Dallas quite well too. They also have that pick that they got from Miami in the Terry Rozier trade. Lotto protected in 2027, but then unprotected thereafter. That's like you're a net plus in the first round pick department. You technically owe one to the Spurs, but it's only it's now, I think we're entering the final year of its lottery protection. Then it turns into 2 seconds. So you have all your own picks and you have some extra firsts here and you have like actually intriguing young players. And I mean, you look at Josh Green, maybe some people throwing him in here. He's only 23. I don't love him. I think he's become kind of like the idea of one of those players. The idea of Josh Green is better than Josh Green. This might be a team that can put him on the ball more. So I think that he could be more interesting offensively. I just never really seen it from him defensively. You can call him a wing defender, but I don't know if he is really a net positive in that department. And if you're asking, well, is he better than Miles Bridges on that end? Might be a good barometer because Miles Bridges' defense is spotty. I would say Josh Green is probably a better individual defender than Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges, because of his size and frame, is going to be more malleable when you're looking if you want to move assignments around and kind of tailor if you're trying to, insulate LaMelo or just do different things with your lineups. They're in a really good spot here, and it might take some time. And I think that, like, even the Grant Williams acquisition ended up panning out really well for them. And you look at just what he's getting paid, basically less than mid-level exception money at this point moving forward. That's a good value deal. And you can do some interesting stuff with your front court lineups now. And the other thing too is just you have guys that could have value in the trade market if you want more pick equity. And I'm saying guys in the sense of Micic is a team that could help out a lot of other squads. Like where if I was the Nuggets, I would have been trying to figure out how to get him instead of waiting on this Russell Westbrook thing. Like, is there a way to get Micic for the Zeke Naji deal? Can you compensate enough without including second round equity? That's someone who, because he has a team option too in 25, 26, could be viewed as an inspiring contract. Cody Martin, not been healthy in 2 years, but you look at that as someone who's on the books for 8.1 million and he's non-guaranteed the year after. Okay, salary matching for sure, but do you remember we're not that far removed from the version of Cody Martin that was hitting some threes, giving you some connective passing on the offensive end, then just really defending his ass off. Like just the breadth of assignments he was covering. That would be 2021, 22, I think. Yeah. Was incredible. And like, he's 28 going on 29 it's not about him getting better, but you can't rule out that he's going to be good. You have Nick Richards, really solid backup big. You have Trey Mann. There's just some weight. Like there's the word that's used a lot with him is wiggle on the offense. Like he's slippery on the offense end with the ball in his hands. So just a lot of these, even if you want to throw Grant Williams in there, a lot of these, and Josh Green included, a lot of these sort of intriguing flyers that I don't think it's going to make the team a lot better than expected. But I think you look at, because you have Bridges, because you have LaMelo, because Brad Miller was good as a rookie. If you get good health from Mark Williams and Cody Martin, and if you're playing Micic, like, yeah, there's a chance everyone might pencil this team in for just another blah, blah season. I don't think they'll contend for a playing spot. And if they end up doing so, I do believe they'll trade out of it. But like, this team has a promising base. And I see more discussions. We'll get to the cliche part of this now. I was trying to not be the typical, should they trade LaMelo? But like Tony Jones, the Athletic, respect the hell out of that guy, was the one who kind of introduced the idea that, I'm not putting this at his feet, a lot of people believe this, think that you should move LaMelo and just rebuild around Brandon Miller. If there's something in LaMelo's medicals, and he's had all these lower body, specifically ankle issues over the years, entertain it. But like, that max contract is not we're talking about a 23-year-old who's already been an all-star, I would call him transcendent vision. If you don't want to say he's a transcendent player, he has transcendent vision and his ability to make full court passes in the open floor, his ability to see things, just the live dribble playmaking aspect, the shooting, both away from the ball, like as someone who could play off Brandon Miller, who can play off Bridges, who can play off Salaun if you want to give them on ball reps, could play off Josh Green. Apparently it's important to get him on ball reps. But also the pull-up shooting, like that is there. And yeah, there are things you'd like him to work on. He's like, he can be stiff and inattentive defensively, and he can be disruptive too because he has great size, but it waxes and wanes. Yeah, you'd like to see that get better. He's 23. he might get better, especially if he's healthier on that end. You'd also like to see him get, if he's not going to get stronger, so we're getting to the point where it's okay, can we expect him to get a lot stronger? Is there a way? He got to the basket a lot more last year, an encouraging sign. The finishing numbers are still not great. He's 23. We're talking about, okay, he finally increased his at the basket frequency. I should have had that exact number pulled up of how much he increased it by. But like the LaMelo Ball drives were a thing, and they were anarchic to some extent. But like the fact that he was doing it, maybe I view that as step one, and then the finishing should come after that. So his rim frequency, 32% of his shots came at the rim last year, compared to 23 the year before and 28 the year before that. He had a ton as a rookie, but like that just played in only 51 games, and like the sample size is all weird. And we're basing it off of the 2 seasons where like he was a more seasoned pro. He increases, and still, 56% at the rim. No, that's bad. That's terrible shot percentage, 23rd percentile in efficiency. But he could get better, and like he can score from at least 2 levels right now. Like when you're looking at getting to the mid range and having the counters there, he shot 44%. Again, 22 game sample size. Sorry, 40% from mid range. Like that's an active counter. Now that you can kind of stash him. Oh, not stash him, but you can use him off the ball. This is like a unique building block that I don't think it's almost, what's the saying about absence making the heart grow fonder? It almost feels like LaMelo Ball's injuries. And I think this tends to happen in sports is people forget, or they then just automatically lower his rating or his value. I can't get there yet. I mean, like we've seen, look at Steph Curry, what he turned into after dealing with some ankle problems early in his career. Like I'm still really high on LaMelo Ball, and I would not move him. And I think if you weren't happy with the demeanor with which he was playing offense last year, there's more like, if you're healthy, talent or coherence on this roster, because you could say, well, I mean, it's talent, but it's probably a drop off from Terry Rozier because they're younger and less experienced. But like there's a clear vision in place. And look, you have a coach in Charles Lee, you come in, there's like a fresh voice in there for him. I think that could help as well. There's off-court stuff that we know that's public. There's also off-court stuff that's not public. Yeah, that could be a concern. But this is, when you're looking at the talent on the basketball court, I hate framing things this way to dismiss any concerns you might have about anything off the court. But just looking at it from like a basketball view, this team is in a pretty good spot right now. And it changes if you don't believe that LaMelo or Brandon Miller are capable of being the guiding light for a rebuild. But one of the single toughest thing to do in a rebuild is to not just get the guy around whom you base everything, but it's to get 2 guys around whom you base everything. The Hornets, I firmly believe, have those 2 guys. And there's health that needs to be caked in for there with LaMelo, the caveat. But to be at that point, when you're still kind of early in this iteration of the rebuild, we know that they've been all over the place for a while now. That's also a big deal. And we're kind of also forgetting, I wouldn't call him, I'd call him part of the core, but I'm not ready to call him a building block. Mark Williams dealt with a lot of back stuff last year. That's a red flag, slightly alarming. Let's see how he heals. I believe he said recently that he's feeling pretty good. When you watch this guy, and I don't know if he's ever going to expand his range to include kind of like, oh, does that floater go down at a higher rate, or is he going to take the mid-range jumper? He shot 7 of 16 on jumpers last year, and there were hints of it as his rookie season. Don't think he's ever going to scale out to 3, but that's he is still an extremely tantalizing developmental piece. And I think his rim protection slipped a little bit last year. I don't know how much of that had to do with like the initial injury, the fact that he just didn't play a ton, and he looked pretty good at parts during early of the year, especially with some of those LaMelo minutes. But when you watch him, there's like, I don't even know who I'd compare him to. And I'm very interested to see if they can get more out of him. Coming in, I was kind of higher on him as a passer. Can they do more stuff with him in the short roll? I don't think we've seen enough of that just yet. They could experiment with that. But like the ability to play 4 out around him basically at all times now, if you want to, maybe that's something you can unlock. But when you watch him play, he kind of has like, I don't know, we'll have to see how it is with all this back stuff now in the rear view, but I don't have a great comp. But the 2 players that immediately that came to mind is, what if Hassan Whiteside was also Onyeka Okongwu? And it's so those are imperfect players. You might not like any of those players, but he seems like those 2 rolled into one. That's a really good player, especially when you think about what Hassan Whiteside was at his peak, but like having the additional mobility and offensive range and vision of an Onyeka Okongwu. I don't know when you're looking defensively specifically, he might be, it feels like he's probably closer to a Whiteside than a Okongwu. I don't think we've seen enough from him looking at the sort of lateral stuff on the perimeter. There's definitely been moments. I don't know if he can be that all over the place. Let's just cite ages again. This is someone who is going into his third year, and he is going to be, this will be his age 23 season. He's 22 right now. I think the Hornets are in a good spot. If I give them a vibe rating on their rebuild, they're still like, okay, well, how does Miles Bridges fit in long term? Is he a part of the core here? What is your intent to do with Josh Green? How are you going to use Salaun right out of the gate? I can't give them the 10 of 10, 11 of 10, no notes, but just based off, it's like if they wanted to get assets via trade for Nick Richards, for Micic, for fucking Bridges at some point, that like even I think a team would give you some. I doubt you get a first round pick for Williams at this point. Maybe if he has a hell of a year and by the trade deadline, but he's only 26 years old. He's 25. This will be his age 26 season. That's like they have a lot of movable parts that you could consider you could consider them dispensable. They're valuable, but they're not mission critical to what you're doing over the long term. So they're like, they can be light on their feet in terms of roster building. And so I think we have to kind of cake in, this is a new regime, so you don't have to bake it in too much, but you do have to account for, right, will they short circuit this at all? Look at the years of the track record. We still don't know enough about really any of these guys, and that includes LaMelo. So there's the wild card aspect. I'm going to go 7.3 out of 10 is the vibes that I'm getting for the Charlotte Hornets rebuild. You guys know what time it is. I'll give you a third extra one there. It is single person stat padding time, which means that I will be reacting to a clip that I find interesting. And so we might have some like more memeable stuff. Maybe we'll get some from the Olympics, but I don't want to deal with footage stuff with that, to be honest with you. But maybe in the season when there's kind of viral moments, we'll be able to do. So you're free to submit clips to me via Discord, email, whatever. I wanted to tackle this Paul George explaining how he left the Clippers and what sort of led to it. There's been a lot of stuff talked about it with already, but I found it to be I watched the clip already, of course. I'm not a listener of the, what is it? The P podcast? What is it? I don't even know what the name of his podcast is right now. Podcast P with Paul George. So I haven't listened to it. I've heard people talk in pretty glowing terms about it, including his co-hosts. So let's get into it. Paul George explains and exposes the Los Angeles Clippers on why he left.
What was the negotiations like with the Clippers to let you know that, hey, I'm leaving y'all and I'm going to Philly?
Okay, I'm going to stop it here because I love that he already just has his Philly jersey on in this. I think that's cool. I loved if anyone didn't read I think it was a Ramona Shelburne piece at ESPN, when the recruiting team from Philly finally showed up at Paul George's house, I believe in California, and the fact that he was wearing an Allen Iverson t-shirt for it. I so want that to be real. I hope that that's like a real legitimate anecdote, that he was just like, hey, yeah, I've already made my decision and we haven't had like the nuts and bolts of this discussion yet. And I'm just going to wear this AI shirt that I have laying around for some reason. I'm sure he could have acquired it pretty quickly, but I thought that was a fun detail, potentially performative detail, but I so badly just want it to be true.
Put it out there like, I never wanted to leave LA. LA is home. This is where I wanted to finish at. I wanted to work as hard as possible to win one in LA. Like, that was the goal.
I will say that's all fine. And we know, I mean, the way him and Kawhi got there, like that's accurate. He has a better chance of, this is just objectively speaking, had he just re-signed with the Clippers, there's a better chance of him winning a title with this version of the Philadelphia 76ers than that version of the Los Angeles Clippers. If anyone thinks that's a spicy take, we have years worth of evidence since roughly 2001 that it's just objectively true.
To be here and be committed to LA. As it played out though, like the first initial deal was, I thought, kind of disrespectful.
I love it. I love this type of candor. That's how you are. Again, I haven't seen, aside from clips of the podcast with Paul George, I love this type of candor, and it's why I probably need to get back on. I've listened to a lot of JJ Redick, his old podcast. Now it's JJ Redick's former podcast, but I guess I'm inherently hesitant to listen to player podcasts because I find a lot of them to be empty. It's also why, like, I've interviewed agents and we've talked to players in the past. Maybe that's now I'm older. I could ask better questions and try and get better answers. I love this is just right off the bat, him framing it as, he's not even like, fuck these guys. I view the offer as disrespectful. So I fave this.
Right. And again, in all of this, no hard feelings. So the first initial deal was like 2 years, 60.
Wow, they offered him Isaiah Hartenstein money, folks. Congratulations to the Clippers for offering Paul George Isaiah Hartenstein money. I've seen the framing of this where, they were going to have him opt in for about $50 million. And so if you view it that way, it was 3 years and 110. That's still fucking disrespectful relative to what the market would have been for Paul George. And relative to what you gave, I'm assuming this is before Kawhi signed his extension, it sounds like, but you ended up at 3 and 150, basically. I'm just going to use round numbers here. For Kawhi, what are we doing here? And even just I understand the way that negotiations are supposed to work, and I've been critical of teams maybe not negotiating harder, but like, what are you? Okay, so opt in, and like you cut your salary by 20 million. It's gonna be nowhere near your max. It's almost like half of what your max salary could have been. I find it a very even bizarre starting point, and it's like come in with a real offer, or like even let them make the first offer so then you can count. Like let Paul George and his team say like, no, we want the max or whatever. So even if you want to frame it as 3 for 110, it's still terrible. That is like a putrid offer.
So I'm like, whoa.
Hey, that's crazy, bro.
That's great.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
So I want to make clear that I agree, but it'd be really funny if just I don't know their names either. So someone can hit me in the chat or Discord, wherever, with them if they want. It'd just be really funny if one of them was like, bro, you didn't sign that? Like, that was fine. You see what you did and went on to do in the playoffs? That was like $15 million money. You were playing like a player on the mid-level. It would just be funny if one of his co-hosts went like what else? I'm curious, like, what else are you supposed to do in this if you did disagree? This offer is so egregious that the reaction is fine, but it'd be funny whereas, and they offered me like the 3 and 150. And are you going to be like, well, it's not a big deal? Like, yeah, you probably should take it. But so I'd just be curious, like, would there be a good, strong counter opinion here?
So I'm like,
Wow.
no, I'm not signing that. This was maybe like October-ish.
So there we go. That's where, so I must have, when I watched this clip, realized that was October. That's, again, even as a starting point, even not knowing what's going to happen with Kawhi, that's a bullshit offer.
Negotiations first started, and it was 260. And as we kept going, it was like, they would go up, inches, to where it was like 44, 45, right?
That I hate. If you're negotiating a salary in real life, which, believe it or not, I have done, I don't understand it, and it sucks that it works this way. So like you ended up at 30 million at first, and then you came up to 45. So you just increased your offer by 50%. When these players have agents, are you just hoping that these players or these agents are going to feel pressured or stupid? I don't like where these are. Everyone has value. I'm not trying to say that, but like if I try to go and negotiate my salary, there are people who are younger than me who will. I think I work pretty hard and then I'm pretty incredible at what I do, but there are people younger than me, maybe will do more quantity than me, who will work for substantially less than I will. It undercuts in a way what I do to a point of, okay, like I can negotiate as hard as I want. My leverage is always going to be capped. In this instance, like Paul George is not to dehumanize him, but he's like this commodity. And so I don't understand that, okay, if it's just and I'm not saying this is right, but if this is someone who's a lesser player, if this is like a regular negotiation where you're just hoping that maybe they're not familiar with the way negotiations work or what they're actually, like you're just, you're working for a corporation and that's what they're giving you. I almost understand it more than this perspective where it's, what the market for PG is going to be next summer. You understand how important he just is objectively to your team is no worse. Even if you think the James Harden trade is happening or did it happen or it happened already at that point, no worse than your third most important player. I just find that mind-bogglingly, numbingly stupid to start there.
But this was like a couple months in between before we got it to 40 something. I'm still like not.
I'd like to know what the breakdown is. It's like, all right, they offered 30 and then what is Paul George's team counter with? No, we want the max. And then they're like, all right, what about like 2 years and 64? And they're just going up by like $1 million and $2 million increments, like over the course of months. I honestly hope that's what happened because that's so objectively stupid.
I'm not doing that. Then I hear wind of like, what they're going to give Kawhi. So I'm like, just give me what Kawhi got. Like,
right.
Y'all.
I'm with the other guy on the podcast. Why not? Like, that's just, they came together. We know Kawhi at his peak is the better player. Paul George, if you're trying to project forward, is probably going to be the more valuable player. Just give him what Kawhi got. I totally agree with that reaction. That doesn't seem like a big deal. And I think will go on to dispel this, but like that was I do wonder if the Kawhi extension ended up costing him leverage when it came to getting the max, where we know Kawhi took slightly less, but like to get a 4th year specifically, if you didn't give that to Kawhi, did the Clippers do that hoping it would pressure Paul George into taking a 3-year extension? And clearly, like, I don't know if he felt pressure, but he saw Kawhi do it and he was like, oh, all right, like I'll do it too. And let's see what they said, folks.
You was the same. Like, we came here together. We want to finish this together. I'll take what Kawhi got.
Let's normalize not bleeping out expletives on podcasts. It really fucking aggravates me. It's a family show, but we don't bleep it out.
Like, no problem. I was cool with that. Like, wow. And we were still taking less. We were taking less. Wow. Kawhi took less. I was like, if Kawhi gonna take less, I'm not gonna say I want more than Kawhi. Like,
that's like a pretty rational response that he's under no obligation to have, by the way. Like, his market is the market, and yeah, you would have to leave to get it, and he did. But to look at it that way is just, Paul George gets memed a lot, and there are a lot of people who I respect cover the Clippers, follow the Clippers, and they just didn't like his attitude and some of the stuff that I guess he preferred to happen on the court or didn't want to do on the court. And so I get all of that, but like right here, relative to what his market is and also the importance to his team, to just say, I'll take what Kawhi got, which was, look, if this was LeBron James taking that less right out of the gate, he probably would have went on before the season started, like a full-scale press tour about it and done signings and had these extended interviews about, like took like 1.5 million less. Like, and it's going to allow the Lakers to set up the next dynasty long after I'm gone. And I'm just here to make sure that I'm preserving the Lakers flagship name. And I'll figure out a way to make up the money somewhere. It's going to be tough, but maybe I'll have to stop. Maybe Bronny James will have to start paying rent. Is even still living there. So, but seriously, like this Paul George bit, and the fact that like the stuff like this didn't come out more, a little bit surprising, but his response of I'll just take what Kawhi got is an appropriate response. And I remain flabbergasted that things ended up the way that they did.
I'm not going to like, it's not about me being paid more than him. Like, I'm going to take what he got. Y'all give him that, give me that. They didn't want to do that.
Why? Oh, wait, the second apron. Right. So let's offer him a deal that's less, but still going to keep us in the second apron. I know. And at this point, so maybe he'll clarify the timeline. I can't remember. Like, are we at the point where Kawhi looks like he might be an MVP candidate? And that's kind of when Kawhi got his extension, like he was at that level, which is why it was seen as such a big deal. And so they're looking at Paul George and saying, well, you're clearly a notch below that. Look what, I talked about this with Jalen Brunson earlier in the episode. If you didn't watch the full episode, go check it out. But like they were hoping, let's use Jalen Brunson with Julius Randle. Knicks are hoping, look at how much Jalen Brunson took last year, about $12.5 million. You have to do the same. Look at what Kawhi did. They're saying this to Paul George, and the Knicks saying that to Julius Randle. I mean, I guess you could say that, but like you're the worst player, and he took this much less, so you should take even less than that. That's just that logic's kind of funny.
So this was before the All-Star break. So I'm like, you know what? I don't want let's not even have no more conversations. Like, let's just play this year out. Cause it was starting to get into like my mood. Now I'm, you know what I mean? Like,
we also need to account for that too. If you thought Paul George was particularly unbearable off the court or with his demeanor this year, okay, fair. But like, if this is going on and he's in a different situation where it's fucking with his livelihood, but he knows that he can replicate, or in this case, exceed what they're offering elsewhere. And so it's not, but it still takes that mental toll. Again, as someone who has negotiated like contracts year to year at points in my career, it's super stressful. And I respect him kind of saying, and by the way, why I'm going through this in part is because Zach Lowe has reported, and he's just one of the, especially because he doesn't report a ton, but he had heard that pretty much everything Paul George said was accurate. And when you're kind of going through this timeline, it sounds like it would be accurate. And so it's feasible. And so it's not like, Patrick Beverley coming up and just embellishing and hyperbolizing everything. So that's also why I'm going through this, is because from what we know and what I understand personally, that his version of events is the most accurate that we've seen, and probably more accurate than the statement that the Clippers ended up releasing before he even officially left.
I didn't want to have that energy carry over into the team. Season in, I finished healthy, 74 games played, and had one of my most efficient seasons.
Ooh, I mean, So Paul George was good. When I was doing my All NBA teams, again, regular season award, he did receive some like splash consideration. He was never really a serious threat for me to win, to make my third team. 22.6 points. He ends up averaging 3.5 assists, shoots 52.3% on threes and on twos, and 41.3% on threes. Over 90% from the foul line. Yeah, heck of an efficient season. Is there going to be any mention about what he did in the playoffs? I mean, he's still at like 20 points, 5 assists. He shot, he dipped on 45% and then 37%. Like even those numbers are not. I know people were mad about his defense by the end of that series, and you look at, especially when sometimes Kawhi's not on the floor, it feels like he's just not like that. Paul George isn't there all the time. And so you turn in the final 2 games of that Dallas series, you're 4 of 13 from the floor, you're 6 of 18 in that game. Was that game 6? In game 6. So like leaving a bad taste in the mouth. And then you had the 7-point game that the Clippers lost in game 3, where you only took 11 shots, went 3 of 11. So again, that stuff matters, but he's not wrong about what he did during the regular season. I have not checked. I'll check now as I'm looking. That was probably, and it was the highest true shooting percentage of his career at the age of 33. And his role got a little bit more streamlined after the acquisition of James Harden, but just he had maybe not his best regular season overall, but he had a really good regular season.
So now we go into negotiations. Now they bring it to 3 years.
Where we at?
150. All right.
Okay, so he got to the Kawhi number, and shit still went sideways. Let's find out why.
That's cool. It sucks that it had to get to this point, like that we couldn't get this figured out a lot sooner. But now we at the end of the year, 3 years, 150. So I'm like, all right, like now we're in a ballpark. You know what I mean?
So it does seem like, if you had to be critical, if he said, just give me what Kawhi got, and they did, but now you're saying, all right, we're close to in the ballpark, and we know that he's going to end up asking for something different. And I am wondering, well, let's see what he had asked for first.
Now we can have conversation here. I presented the 150 no trade, because in the meeting they're like, we want you here long term. We want to, when you're retired, we want you to be a Clippers for a lifetime, like all of this stuff. So I'm like, cool.
Always fair for a player, if they're eligible for it, to ask for the no trade. I do think it hamstrings you in ways where they're probably like, right now, if everyone was a free agent, maybe there's 5 players I would give it to. So it's well within the Clippers' rights to say no, but I don't think it's egregious that Paul George asked for one, especially when anyone like getting Blake Griffin vibes of, we want you to be a Clipper for a lifetime. They pitched Blake Griffin on that, and then they shipped him out the following season. And again, that was their right according to the contract, but I understand why you would ask for the no trade, especially with this team.
Cool. Give me the 3 years, 150, no trade then. Like no trade clause. Then I'm taking less, but at least I know I'm here. Mm-hmm. Like I'm committed to y'all. Like they didn't want to do the no trade.
Do that?
Wow. So then now
I'm actually, so I get why the Clippers don't want to do that ask. I would not have given Paul George a no trade clause. If that was for 3 years, and you look at it, right, like there's at the, like, we can tough this out. And there's also just an element of, where are you going to try and send him that he wouldn't approve? I wouldn't have given it to him. However, and if they would have given it to him over the 3 years, whatever, but I understand why he asked for it. I do find the reaction of the other 2 people on this podcast like, whoa, they really didn't give you a no trade clause. It's like, there are 2 people in the NBA that have a no trade clause right now. But that's the reaction where it's like, wow, they wouldn't even give you a no trade clause. Well, that's not a small thing. Teams just don't include that. Ask the Wizards how Bradley Beal's no trade clause worked out for them. Ask the Suns how inheriting that no trade clause is working out for them currently.
I'm like, all right, well, then it only makes sense for me to do 4 years, 212.
Yeah, that's fair. Saying, if you're going to move me whenever, like, I want to guarantee myself like this, because he could go somewhere. This isn't just about injury. If you just trade him, which this team is implosive especially now without him, they just trade him somewhere. What if he's just not as good a fit, or he has to acclimate himself and like his game begins to decline because they're using him differently and he doesn't get to go through a training camp initially, or the chemistry is just always off, or it isn't the perfect fit. It's a team that made a stupid move and wanted a big name. And again, it's what he ends up getting anyway. So that's not a big ask at all. And by the way, the Clippers, you can't like this gives you flexibility to work underneath the aprons, but it does not give you the cap space to replace Paul George if you do not go to 4 years.
Right? Like, at least pay me my money. If y'all gonna trade me, then y'all gonna trade me. But at least, like, now I'm not in a situation where I could have got more had I just gone to free agency, then take this deal, and then y'all could just ship me wherever I want, and then now I'm on this deal that I didn't want.
That's really fair, too, when you're looking at it from the perspective of a no-trade clause, of just for the 3-year ask, where it's, okay, I'm sacrificing a year and guaranteed money here. So it's not just... You might be able to recoup that when you sign your next deal, like to extend your career as a max-ish player, let's say, but maybe not. So you're taking the risk. And so for him to frame it as, yeah, I am, like, we're cutting down, like, I want the extra year, but if you give me the no trade clause, I don't need it. So if he came in 4 years, no trade, like, this is just what it needs to be. Okay. But when he frames it like this, it makes the ask of the no trade clause a little bit, not that it wasn't understandable in the first place, but it's okay. Like, I could see why the Clippers might've considered it. The fact that they said no, I'm perfectly fine with.
So they didn't want to do that.
Stupid. Again, and they released a statement that cited the second apron and limitations. Those limitations are real when you're looking at, I doubt, and first of all, the tax penalties aren't going to be as punitive until 2025, 2026. I really don't think this is about Steve Ballmer specifically caring about the money. It's when, I mean, sure, caring about the money. But these teams are genuinely worried about the restrictions it poses on transactions and your ability to make them. That is the bigger thing here. The issue is they offered him a contract that would have put them in the second apron if they were planning on keeping James Harden, which they obviously were. Otherwise, why give up the pick equity that you did? And so it doesn't square. And if you thought, well, like next year, fine, but like, what about these, the 2 years after that? Figure it out. Like, these are all guys that you could move if you need to duck the second apron or you want to hit the reboot button. And to let someone walk away for absolutely nothing who's as talented as Paul George, especially when you gave up the moon to get him, that we don't need to relitigate that trade. Yes, it's a failure when you look at their success. In the moment, there's not... I mean, Sam Presti might be the only GM that wouldn't have been on the other side of that trade at the time. And I would argue that if you rewind time and he was in the Clippers spot, like, and he was negotiating with like, he makes that trade. So making the trade was totally justifiable, but to now end up at this point where he just left for nothing is inexcusable when you had the opportunity to keep him on just something that was out there for him. This isn't astronomical, really just brain-bendingly dumb stuff from the Clippers.
So now I was like, now I'm open to entertaining what's out there. And then, I mean, through the negotiations, they wasn't budging. They weren't gonna budge. I wasn't gonna budge. I thought I played well enough.
By the way, and I like the other side of this, where we're talking about LeBron taking the biggest pay cut anyone's ever taken, followed by Jalen Brunson basically not even taking a pay cut because he was promised money after the life of his deal, or however people want to frame that. This is the other side of that, like sort of the Brunson thing, where it's, yeah, first of all, he was willing to take less than the max anyway, but yeah, don't budge if you think you had a good year, or you are eligible to make this money. That money is out there for you. Like, that is your market value, even if people think that's a bad deal. It's well within the Clippers' rights to also think that's a bad deal, but you knew an offer like that would be out there. And if you didn't want to pay Paul George that fourth year in a vacuum, this sounds outrageous to say, especially when you look at where they were at the trade deadline, but then you should have moved him. And so I will never believe that this was part of their plan, that they let Paul George walk because of the second. They fucked this up, I think, is really what happened.
For them to, be like, you know what? He's a part of our future. Like, I thought I did that. I thought I earned that. Granted, we didn't win while I was there.
You think, buddy? That's stating the obvious, but at least, look, granted, we didn't win really much of anything, and we haven't won a playoff series in 2001, but that's just a small, tiny caveat. So again, I get the Clippers' trepidation to perpetuate this, but like, then why give Kawhi the extension and keep James Harden type deal? Be all in, or like hit the reboot button. Like, don't do this sort of half-baked bullshit that's going on here. We should remember to censor that because it's a family show. Oh wait, we don't censor that because censoring the expletives is stupid.
But luck has a lot to do with that. We couldn't remain healthy as a unit. But I thought I did enough to earn that. I love Steve. I love Lawrence.
The platitudes, I don't even know if we need to watch those. He doesn't seem like he has any genuine hard feelings for it. So I commend Paul George for the way that he ended up handling all of this. And the timeline all lines up. And I think the most ridiculous thing that's not even really ridiculous at all is I think it's just how shocked his fellow co-hosts were that he didn't get the no trade clause. And it's like, come on, nobody gets a no trade clause unless you play for the Wizards, obviously, or you're LeBron James. So I still think the Clippers fumbled the bag. We'll see what they look like next season, but they're like teetering somewhere in the sub middle of the Western Conference, it feels like now. And then Kawhi being pulled out of Team USA for concerns about his knees. Like that's just really, and Kawhi is a dominant force when he is healthy, but we just have so many years worth of proof that he's probably not going to be available when you need him. And that I don't know what the best way to handle that is. Is it don't play him during the regular season, load magic him, or is it let him play so that he's like, doesn't have to ramp up? He did that last year. Neither one of it's worked so far. So it sucks that his body's betraying him. And I wonder if that factored into Los Angeles's decision. But even if it did, Paul George would have been movable on if one, you could have just offered him at the same time as Kawhi, it sounds like. You could have just offered him the same deal and he would have taken it. And then you could have just moved him, whatever. You still could have moved him on the 4-year deal. And so I don't buy, and that's why you buy more of what Paul George is saying, is that what the Clippers have said, frankly, just doesn't add up. Hope you enjoyed this. This was a fun episode for a solo podcast. I enjoyed doing it. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Be ready for the merch drop. It is coming. I don't know when. I'll talk to Grant about it. Sicko Mode shirt. It's the Sicko collection. I'm really proud of it. I did most of the design work on it. My wife also helped me out because she's awesome. But yeah, so subscribe if you haven't already. YouTube, Spotify, Apple, the whole 9. Go join our Discord. Rumor has it the Discord will be locked at some point soon. I don't know when. So get in there. Everyone who's in there already, like the Discord will still be there, but we don't know how long we're going to keep the link itself actually open for. So if you've always thought about getting in there, there's a lot of good spirited discussions that happen. There's also right now, like the Boston Celtics room is dedicated to one of our listeners. Just wrapped their first watch through of Psych. So jealous that they were able to do that. So go check out that show. Sounds like he still has the movies to go. So go check those out. But so that will be going away soon. The Discord itself will remain active. Anyone who's already in there, but I don't think it's going to remain open much longer. So if you haven't done so, now's your chance to get in there. Until next time, and as always, I leave you with the shout out to the one, the only, the indelible. Can't wait to see him back in the NBA. Please don't send me direct messages about how poorly he's doing when he runs point for France. Frank Ntilikina.